we could today look at these tier 2 questions and just get a sense from folks. By the way, I started the recording. And just get a sense where people are at, and maybe also, kind of bounce some ideas back and forth. Does that sound like a good plan?
Mm-hmm.
Can everybody see this? Is it big enough for people to see?
It's good.
Yep.
Okay. So, by the way, it's not going to ask for a person's name. This is a PDF file. I took that out. So so okay. So basically the questions are going to have this format. Please indicate if and how much this action would lead to improvement. 1, this is not necessary at all. And 5, it would have very significant positive impact. So we listed several statements. Let me see how many. 6. And this is for organizational values. So
so Cello,
yes,
the concept was to try to indicate or come up with, let's say, positive statements that would be what people could comment on.
Yes.
That are involved in that particular process or function that's being evaluated and assessed, and come up with, here are the kind of things that if I'm filling out the survey that I think would be actions that would be appropriate for to address the particular category that we're talking about, right?
Yeah, that is correct, and thank you. You're officially now a simultaneous Croatian translator. You have a new skill. So that is correct. And if you recall, our first cut at tier 2 questions were like, let's dive in deeper and see how bad things are. But then we thought maybe it's better to turn it around into positive, because people would then, like Scott says, feel that, okay, we heard that there's a problem. How can you maybe invite them to become a part of the solution and engage them on that level. So that was why we went to the positive statements. So I need to get my notebook ready. So this is on organizational values. Just at a glance, does this make sense to you, these 2 statements that I have up?
What was the category again, Cello?
This is organizational values.
Got it.
And just
So
these second tier questions come after we answer the first tier 1 questions, and where we say, not satisfied or neutral, that's when these questions will come.
That's correct. You would have the results from tier 1, and then you would look at which category scored low, and then you would say, let's just try tier 2 just for that category. So if something was all terrific, then you wouldn't really follow up with tier 2, but you would follow up if when analyzing the responses to tier 1, it seems like things are not very very good.
So I take the tier 1 survey today, then 2-3 weeks we get the result, we discuss internally, and down the line we choose to do tier 2 questions.
That is correct. Yes. And sorry, go ahead.
At Parijat, we had talked about there being some flexibility on how you wanted to handle it, but potentially you might want to have a workshop and do this rather than just send out questions to people to answer. You might want to actually convene them because they're the stakeholders that are involved and kind of your choice what you want to do, but there's some choices on different ways to approach it based on what you think is best.
So, Charlotte, I like that approach, and I think the providing options that not just send out the survey, maybe have focus groups to address the different issues, and then, you know, go through these kind of questions. They could be options that we could provide. I'm just looking at your first question, and I'm already like thinking, okay, taking active steps. Well, what does that mean? What kind of active steps, right? So if I was asked taking active, well, of course, taking active steps by, you know, would be good. But I mean, what does that really mean? I mean, for a leader, active steps is, okay, I told OD, let's do something, and then nothing ever gets done. So I'm just wondering if that's too general, although I don't want to be too specific either, because every organization will have a different issue. But that seems to me just.
So, Kesra, one of, there's sort of a threshold question here. I mean, one is to leave these relatively general, but statements about the kind of things that need to be addressed, and have the group kind of figure out what that might mean in the context of that particular process or organization or group of people as to what those steps might be, rather than being overly prescriptive in terms of what to do in terms of fair treatment, because that could be all over the place, really.
No, and I understand. I don't want to be too prescriptive but I think that question just sort of says, well, take active steps. I'm not saying let's define what those steps are. I'm just saying it needs to be more than just.
Yeah, let me see. I'm first of all, I'm not defending this, and I'm perfectly happy to change it. I can just, yeah, if you see that the first three are all start with taking active steps, and okay, we asked the question in a positive way, but we're actually trying to figure out what needs to be fixed. So the question used to be, are employees being fairly treated by the leadership and management? That's what the old question was. So instead of asking, defining the problem, we twisted it, well, turned it around a little bit to say, yeah, we need to, make sure that this happens. Because if you you're absolutely right that how do you define fair? What are the criteria for fair? It is generic.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with the word fair treatment. I'm just saying that I mean, when we say taking active steps, maybe we could say something like, establish a process or policies or something impacting, fair treatment of employees, right? So we don't have to define what those things are, but it's very succinct. Hey, leaders, you've got to be, it's not just take active steps. You got to really establish some process or something that shows to ensure that.
Okay. Sure.
You see where I'm getting at, right?
No, I
could even be establish common principles that we are going to use in our organization to assure fair treatment of employees.
Exactly. Because those steps could be anything. Okay, I'm going to just verbalize something in there.
So how would, I didn't catch it. So could you tell me, Scott, what did you say?
Well, what I said, and it could be process instead, like she was saying, Kasra was saying, but it could establish common guiding principles that we will use to ensure fair treatment of employees.
Okay, so it's establish common guiding principles?
Yeah, or something like that would be. Like,
Okay.
what are we trying to accomplish? You know, what are the positive things that we're going to do? Or behaviors would be another thing. What are the, you know, the common behaviors that would help ensure, you know, establish common behaviors to ensure fair treatment. One of those things. I mean, the group ought to
Okay.
decide, but a process doesn't get at the underlying things that you want to do. So I was just thinking whether it's principles or whether it's behaviors, you know.
Policy.
Parijat, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, or, policies or, so just something to say that the leadership is going to do something concrete, right? So that to
Guidelines.
ensure fair treatment, not just take some active step.
Okay.
Something really,
Yeah. Good guidelines is something else that,
guidelines is another good word. Establish guidelines.
yeah, guidelines is more specific than principles.
Parijat, what do you think?
Yeah, I like what Kesra said because initially when I read this, that taking active steps and how you had mentioned that we are trying to have positive statements to identify, to ask employees what would make the change. So I like what Kesra said, that to be more specific, we have to keep it general, but where is this active steps coming from? So mentioning that leaders and then having it is general enough to say guiding principles and who is sort of driving it with leaders. I like where it is going. I think it's better than how it is stated, right?
Okay, so it would be leaders to establish common guiding principles or behaviors to ensure fair treatment. Is that where we landed, sort of? Okay. Shelley, does that sound okay to you?
Yeah, I'm looking at it from the equity lens.
Yeah.
So, for both of them, when we eliminate favoritism, hiring opportunities, fair treatment, because I think we talked about making sure we add that component, the equity component, in with everything that we're doing. That's the new wave to make sure. So, guiding principles, steps, process, just fair treatment is the most important word for employees and leadership. So however we word that, we don't want to be too ambiguous, leaving interpretation for everybody, because everybody's idea of fair treatment, I think Kesra said it, is different.
Yeah.
Everybody's steps to fair treatment is different. So I think that common practice, common principle that the organization can use. It's common. We're all going to use it. We're not going to take our own approach to it, but we want to make sure across the board that these things are happening for all employees. That's one of the things that I'm doing now. And Kesra talked about, I'm doing focus groups as well. So what I'm doing is the trust surveys throughout the whole bureau. And then based on the most common concerns or issues, then I'm having focus groups to get a more in-depth understanding of what that is. Because what I might think it is may be something different from what people have experienced. So I don't want to project what I believe should be the issue and the solution versus talking to people and actually getting their narrative and following it with that. So that's kind of like I've been working coincide with the group and what I'm actually doing. Like every 2 weeks, it's like we still moving in unison. So that's one of the things. And then Marco, he's not on the call. He's enacted equity groups. So within our division. So we got to make sure we incorporate that. I know that was the long way, but
Shelley, on number 2, which you said was develop common practices to eliminate favoritism, might work pretty well.
Exactly. Yeah.
But you know what I'm finding? So I'm finding that there are policies already in place, but the practices are different from
Yeah.
person to person, division to division, group to group. There are a lot of personalities that override principle. So the issue I'm finding is not policy. We have policies in place. People just not following them. They're just doing their own thing.
So enforcement, I guess.
Yeah, because that's what we had to create, like employee relations, not department, but person, to just make sure management's following what's already written. Like, we don't have to recreate anything. We've got a lot of good policies in place, but maybe 2 divisions are following it and 6 divisions doing their own thing. So it looks like we're all over the place, where people are just deciding to take their own steps to ensure certain people are favored or hired or have opportunities or treated well. And then when we go to the books and like, well, we need to create a policy, we're like, well, we got one here, especially under collective bargaining units, which is governed by most of our utilities. It's one of 3 units. So we have the policies, they're just not being enforced. So even if you talk about a guiding principle, a process, what ensures that it will be enforced? That's why we're here.
Yeah.
We got a lot going on. We got a lot of SOPs written, a lot of policies, but they're just not enforced.
So does
Sometimes
this,
the leader is the problem.
Yeah.
And that's what this was addressing here.
Right.
So if they establish it, enforce it on the part of others, but don't follow it themselves, then
we
that's a
got
problem.
problems.
does this sound better? Leaders to establish, enforce, and hold all accountable to follow common and consistent practices to ensure fair treatment of employees. Is that too cumbersome?
Yeah, it's too, I like what it's saying, but
I like hold all accountable. Enforce seems a little aggressive. Leaderships to establish policy, practices, whatever, and hold all accountable to follow consistent practices to ensure something like that. Like, we don't need all the words.
So leaders to establish common and consistent practices to ensure and hold all accountable to whatever. Is that what you were? I'm just trying to capture what you were saying, Shelley.
Yeah. Well, establish common, consistent. Common is too common. Effective and consistent practice to ensure leadership should establish.
One possibility would be that we sort of have the gist of it and we could wordsmith it, but to get through
Right.
the others maybe.
Yeah.
yeah, I think you have enough there to wordsmith. That we have to have established common and effective and consistent practices, and B, that everybody is accountable, that there should be some process or something to ensure accountability.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree that this could be possibly A and B than just being one.
So you're saying this number 1 and 2 should be in the same, is that what you're saying, in the same question? Is that what you're saying, Parijat?
No, no, no. I was just saying about the leaders to establish common. So here we are asking feedback on two things. That leader to establish and then to hold accountable. There are two.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
Oh,
you
yeah,
would,
that's, leaders
Yeah.
to establish effective practices and to holding all accountable, right, okay.
so I think there should be two. The only reason I say that is, just like you said, Shelley, that some organizations may have established, so, but then
Right,
are they holding them accountable?
right,
So, so if in your organization, leaders to establish consistent practice, I may say, that's not an issue because we have them. But
right,
our issue is they're not accountable, right?
exactly, correct.
Should be two separate. And that,
Just keeping in mind that part of the gist of the original question was that it was some responsibility on the part of leadership to actually do these things that weren't being done.
Right,
And so on the first first question, it was taking steps to ensure treatment by leadership, as opposed to leadership's assuring it. But it can be wordsmith, but the problem that we're trying to solve was usually with leadership. It wasn't with the employees.
and this is about the leadership, right?
yeah.
Leadership has to be accountable.
Leadership has to be accountable for what's already established or even establishing some
Right.
practices that promote fair treatment. So it's top down.
okay, so
So instead of saying hold all, I think organization to hold leadership
Leadership.
accountable.
so you
Right.
wouldn't hold any managers accountable?
Well, I consider managers as leaderships, right? I mean, they're in the leadership. role.
Right.
Or
Okay.
just say
Or
management.
team leads. I mean, any supervisory role where you have employees that are under you, you're leading them, right? I mean, I would.
Yeah,
Right.
or organization to hold leaders accountable is another way to do it.
hold
Yeah,
lead-
That's good. That's good.
That's good.
can we say leaders and managers? Because, some first line supervisor there may not think, like me leadership, I'm the one, getting squashed by leaders. I don't know. You guys are experts. I'm just asking lay person's questions, okay? So should I say organization to hold just leaders? Or leaders and managers, or?
Leaders, if you consider yourself a leader, regardless of whether, I mean, so a manager that has team leads underneath him, the manager has to be held accountable. Then the team lead, if they have people under them, then the team lead has to be accountable. So it's all levels of management and supervisory roles, really.
So to hold, you have a problem with the word all. So you want to replace it with leaders, organization to hold leaders accountable.
And the only reason we're saying that is because, as Scott mentioned, the question really was focused on leaders, right? And leadership to develop that organizational culture.
And
Okay,
then we spoke about that we would be creating, a list and defining what we mean when we say leaders. And 1, 2, there is some degree of customization that can happen at utility level when it's a division, it's a business unit, it's a team or what group, whatever you call with a group within your organization. So that level of customization is more that's happening at utility level for language.
okay.
The other thought I have is the first question should say organization to establish common. And then the second question is leaders to be held accountable.
Yeah, I kind of like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right? So the organization has to establish, the team lead isn't going to establish that. The organization,
Yeah.
that level has to. And then the second question is that the leaders now have to follow those, right?
Right.
Yeah.
What the
That's good.
organization has developed and be
Yeah.
accountable for it.
Can we at least say leaders / managers?
Yes, please say that.
Because,
I'm
you
gonna tell
know,
you why. No, I agree. I'm gonna tell you why. Because in our section, we have management, we have managers, division chief, managers, section leaders, and supervisors. So
yeah,
there are 4 different types, and one might not think themselves as the other. Like a supervisor might not consider himself a leader. Like he's just following what his section chief told him to do, which is following what his division chief told him to do, which is following what his manager told him to do. I mean, that's how our thing is set up. It's a little, I think it's a military structure.
I think I come back to where Parija said that when, we have to define what we mean by a leader then, right? Because I know in my organization, so let's say we say, okay, it's leaders and managers. So what does that mean to me is, so the executive leadership team, then there is the directors, then there's the managers, and then there's the team lead. So the team leads don't have to be accountable. They don't have to treat their people that they're not accountable to make sure that they're treated fairly then, if we're just going to say leaders and managers.
how about what I have right now? Do you see what I have on the screen? Is that better?
Yeah, it covers everybody.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I would say, should we say at all levels or on all levels? I don't know which one's better.
I don't know.
Kasra, leaders could also mean if I'm not a supervisor or a manager, but I am a high level business analyst and I am coordinating a team and I have nobody reporting to me, but the way I conduct my process, also needs to be taking, following, making all levels accountable to, be following policies and practices. So we can't just have rogue employees who are actually acting as leaders, even though they don't supervise somebody, but they could be a team lead or something, so it could apply to any employee, really.
Yeah, that's true.
Even though we're targeting, who are those that can make a difference, but, I'm sure that people like, well, whomever, but if you're not supervising people, Shelley, for example, maybe you are, but you can still influence how you have practices that ensure fair treatment of all employees.
Actually, I'm not, and that was a great statement. I am in the higher level department of the administration, but I don't have any direct reports. I'm an individual contributor to the administration. So that's why I'm doing a bureau-wide survey, bureau-wide focus groups. And that's part of the integrity of what I'm doing, is to make sure everybody gets an opportunity to participate, all voices are heard, that kind of thing. So yes, that's correct.
But leader could apply to you,
Yeah,
regardless of whether you have
absolutely.
an organizational role, right?
Yes.
Yep.
So is it
Good.
reasonable the way it is now, or should we change it further, you think?
I think the reason I struggle with actually listing them, because then we're limiting it just to those 3. Then we're not expanding it to what Shelley just talked about. I would rather just say organization to hold leaders at all levels accountable to following established.
Okay, that's good too. Then that covers everybody.
That means anyone that's leading any effort, right? Because otherwise you're now saying these are the only 3 groups of people.
Okay.
Going to be responsible. Yeah.
My only concern is, what if you have just a regular employee treating people unfairly?
Well, I thought this was about the leaders.
Yeah, it's okay, but what I'm saying, I will leave this as is. My concern is that I know that in organization that I'm really familiar with, a manager would never say, consider themselves, they think that, people at the very top are leaders and everybody below is just like Shelley said, it's just like military.
Yeah.
And they don't say, I'm not the lead, I'm just a team manager, I'm just a unit manager, I'm just a section manager, I'm just a group manager, I'm not the leader. So
then if it is for everybody, then we can say all. The only reason we took the all out was because we thought these questions were specific to the leader. But if we're saying these questions are generic to anybody in the organization, then we don't even have to use the word leaders in the second section. Then we can say organization to hold everybody accountable. Right? I mean,
Sure.
like the only reason we went to leadership because we thought that tier 1 question was talking about leadership, and this tier 2 question is about the leaders. That's the reason why we were talking leaders. But if that's not the case, then it can be all. So what was the leading question to this tier 2? I guess
well, in my experience, and this again, Parijat and Shelley and you guys and Kesra, you are, I'm an engineer, okay? So you guys should overrule what I say. But
no, we agree with what you're saying. We're just talking about this particular survey, this particular part of the section. I absolutely agree with you. Everybody should be responsible. I should be fair and equitable to everybody else as well. I'm just saying in terms of this particular survey, at least my understanding was that the tier 1 question was talking about leadership, and these questions are pertaining to leadership, not necessarily just employees of the organization. But if that's the case, if that's not the case, then saying all is fine. I mean, I would rather do all, but
okay.
I'm just looking at how this survey is laid out. If tier 1 is talking about leadership and the tier 2 question is about everybody and not leadership, then we are not.
No, tier 1 is about organizational culture. So it's really, and I can bring up those questions if you'd like.
It's the number 1 is more about the culture of fair treatment. Maybe the second one might be more about leadership because they're the ones who hire, promote, and give opportunities for learning and advancement.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
So maybe it's okay the way it is, the way you have it, Cello.
In the, like in here?
Yeah.
Okay. So how about the number 2 here? This one.
Along the lines of what you guys are saying, it might be, talk about take or establish and follow practices and principles or procedures to eliminate favoritism.
I can, the last organization from I just retired had really strong policies in place, but there were ways to get around it. So this is, and it was like everybody in 95% or 99% of the cases, if you ask somebody who's going to get that job, they would tell you and they'd be right. Mm-hmm. And this is how management did it. They did it over there. They're supposed to have, like a panel and rule who's on the panel and stuff like that. But if a manager wanted to promote Cello, right, he would say, Cello, why don't you take on these additional duties? And they would officially, send me blah, 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 expand my duties. Then 6 months later, they would go to HR and says, well, Cello's doing more than his classification. We can't do this. We got to do something about it. And HR would say, well, shit, we got to change his classification. We'll have to move him up. You know what I mean? I mean, there are like a million ways to go around it. So my own sense is that the stuff here is about how people feel. It's not, and they get a feeling based on, you know, what they see and it's not, how should I say, the policies are absolutely essential, but they're, I don't know, I've seen,
Practices kind of gets in,
yeah,
practices kind of gets into what people actually do.
yeah,
Whereas you're right, policies might say, we don't discriminate, we don't have favoritism. But that's not reality, is what you're saying, Cello. And
yeah.
so, but, yeah,
Shelley, what do you think?
So
I'm gonna
had,
keep calling on you because you're making sense. So that's, you know,
yeah, well, I've been with the city for 20 years, so actually 21. So I've seen a lot of things. I was a part of a 5-panel hiring practice, and I was completely thrown left because it was already decided who was going to get the position. They just went through the formalities of the interviews because that's the policy. The policy says you have to interview, you have to schedule interviews, you have to pull from a list. So you apply for the job, you are eligible, HR puts you on a list, then you get sent an interview date. So once I got to the, I only did it one time because I just refused to do it again. But they had already decided, so they were just going through the formalities because it's policy. So it's kind of, I think this is a general, I think what's happening is we can create general statements or general directives, but how it's being handled and interpreted and the practices and the prior practices is going to be as individual as we are. Because there's no established way to make sure favoritism's wiped out, promotions are across the board, everybody gets their opportunities and they're learning and they're advancing. It's policy. I'm right now on a panel. We're creating succession planning. And so we're creating the path, your career path, on how you could move from entry level all the way up. But in reality, that does not happen. But it's just a part of the policy. So
instead of taking active steps, so it could be taking corrective steps if it's a problem. But Parjat, what are you thinking?
I think she had to take a call.
Oh, yeah, she's on, had a comment. Yeah.
this
Chat.
is, you know, this is my thought. And again, you know, Shelley, I'm, you know, this is just based on my observations. People will keep hiring and promoting friends or people who are like them unless they can get in trouble for it.
Okay.
They will do it. And there has to be, in my mind, there has to be a balance, because they can do it because an complete imbalance of power, and they, you know, they control too many things. But and maybe I'm off the reservation on this one, but if there is a legitimate, not legitimate, a way for somebody to protest these decisions and for some independent review that's truly independent, it's just going to keep happening.
Right.
You know, Clausewitz, the historian, said war is too important to be left to the generals. You know, so in this case, I think that enforcing these things that are so important for how people see their jobs, their lives, themselves, you know, is too important to be left to just the policies. There's got to be some hammer back, you know, there's got to be some some way to you disagree?
One thing some of the organizations are doing is not leaving everything up to a hiring authority, you know, that they basically have, you know, checks and balances. They've got HR plays a stronger role in the selection process, in the screening of applicants, in making sure that there's diversity included, and et cetera. So it could be I mean, if it's a problem, it's either bad behavior or it's basically the process itself isn't really robust enough to eliminate the favoritism.
The problem I have with that, HR is the problem.
In the organization where I was,
yeah,
Shelley,
unfortunately, HR is the hiring
Really?
agent. Yeah. Even
But
though it's a 5-panel process, it all still has to go through it goes through HR, and they do a scoring, like you get scored. So who's to say we all 5 go to an interview? I scored above everybody, but you don't get to see your scores. You can protest it. There have been issues where people thought they did well on their interview and they should have got the job, and then they pull the scores and was like, well, you didn't score well on the interview. Well, how's that? If I know I'm going to hire Cello, I'm just going to score him high on every level so that it makes sense if we have to audit. And I have to show you why Cello was hired. It doesn't mean that he was the best candidate.
Yeah, I think there's got to be, we have another meeting in 14 minutes, but
okay.
This is, no, but this is, I'll tell you my personal experience at the job where I was. I was interviewed for a job, and the person that I was competing with was the best man, the person who was making the hiring decision was best man on his wedding, and he was the best man on that guy's wedding, and they've been college buddies and colleagues for I don't know how many years. And HR did not see this as a problem.
Right.
So, sorry.
Yeah, no, Cello, I agree with you. And I think the issue that we're having right now is we understand that those are problems in every organization in some shape or form, right? Either it's HR or it's just favoritism of some sort. The question we're getting to here is, what is an organization doing about to eliminate or at least reduce the amount of favoritism that's going on? And so we're not offering solutions here. We're highlighting to the organization that in your culture you've got favoritism. So that's the questions that we ask should be worded such that, do we feel that in our organization that favoritism exists? And number 2, what is the organization doing about it? There are multiple solutions. Like, just for example, I know that when I applied for, it was a company in Canada, I applied for a job at Union Gas. The first, they had us go through 2 sets of interviews. The first interviews were done by managers that were not in that department. Right? So they had 2 managers that came, that you had an interview with, that were from different areas and departments. And you know, they kind of looked at the personality of the person, their knowledge, not necessarily about the job itself, but just overall. And once you pass through that, then I had to go through a second interview, which was with the person that I would be working for, plus another manager from his organization, from his area. And so I went through that, and they all both scored, you know, and then those scores went to HR, and then HR took the whole score of all the 4 managers that had hired. Those are part of the organization that, or that area department, those that were not, and then said, here's the list of candidates that we feel, and then HR did their sort of whatever cross checks and reference checks and whatever And that's how they went through where there was no favor. You couldn't be, there was no opportunity to be. I mean, one manager may favorite one person, but then there's 3 others that, may not. They don't know the person or the job. But I mean, but we're not offering solutions here, right? We're just trying to identify that an issue exists.
Well, I think that those are good points. And one thing that it shows us is we spent an hour talking about one question, maybe 2. We really need to, this is a tough thing, because I feel very strongly that, this is a real problem, and it's not easy to find a solution. But if we don't at least try to kind of put things right, it's just kind of disturbing,
So
You're on mute.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No,
Well,
he's on
either
mute.
you get prescriptive about it, but it may not be a one size fits all depending on the organization.
Right.
The other thing is just saying, you got to take corrective action. You got to do something about this. And then you basically discuss with the organization what they are going to do to address the problem.
Let me just, and this comes entirely from my background as a control system. A control system works because there is a feedback signal in most, which means that there's a way, because like the hiring, promotion, and these are all really processes. This is what people do. If there is a way to audit or look into the process and see it was fair, and if it's transparent, it's a little easier, so
I think the concern, well, not concern, but the challenge that we have is that HR is a separate agency within our DPW department. So we don't have control over whether they eliminate favoritism, their hiring, promotions, we don't govern HR. That's it. So we can say it all day long and employees can respond to it. But HR is its own independent agency within the department. So they run it however they see fit, unfortunately. But I get the statement. The statement is to eliminate it, regardless of who's in charge of it or in control of it. So,
yeah,
I mean, we could spend forever on this one, I think.
yeah. So how about this? We should, and it would also be good to kind of hear from, people like Marco and people who have his role in other organizations, because these are important things. So perhaps we can table this one for now and just figure out how we're, everybody can kind of put their thinking cap on. And then when we get together next time, or maybe in the meantime, start to forming some ideas. And I'm completely fine with changing any of these statements as long as, they're useful. They're just a straw man, really.
So Cello, along those lines, does it make sense to create a spreadsheet where people can basically go through and make suggestions?
Yes, absolutely. I can do it, and I can post it and share it. I've actually done this before, but but I'll do it again.
Yep.
Okay. So, well, this is really tough, but it's a good fight. So,
No, it's
I
good
hope,
because we just want to make sure we get the right question in place,
yeah,
get the appropriate response, right? So,
yeah. Okay. Well, I'm gonna just to make sure nobody's late for their next meeting, I'm gonna stop the recording and thank everybody. And